Welcome to Happy Times and Places, in which I, Toby Hadoke, ask a friend of mine to watch a Doctor Who story and choose their favourite things about it. I then have to watch along with a positive outlook and see if I can guess what their favourite things are. The guest is not always somebody related to somebody in the story, but this time it is.
Hello, my name is Martin Jameson, and Toby has very kindly asked me to select my favourite or an episode or a series of Doctor Who that is of particular interest to me to watch and talk about. And in case, in the very strong likelihood that you haven't got a clue who I am, I was born Martin Jacobs, and my father was Anthony Jacobs, who was an actor who some of you will know played Doc Holliday in the 4-part Doctor Who series with William Hartnell called Gunfighters. And you may also have by now realised that my brother is Matthew Jacobs, who has recently made a rather wonderful documentary called Doctor Who Am I, about his experience writing the TV movie that featured Paul McGann. Don't ask me to say what number Doctor he was, because I don't know, which is why I have to confess to you at this stage that I am myself not particularly a massive fan of Doctor Who. But don't switch off, because hopefully I will have some interesting things to say. So I did watch Doctor Who as a child, and I was a 60s kid. I was born in 1960, so I grew up with it. And my doctor, everyone has their doctor, I'm told, my doctor was Patrick Troughton, and then later John Pertwee. I loved Patrick Troughton. He played the recorder or something, and he was rather strange, and I seem to remember finding him a little bit scary, which I liked. And I liked finding William Hartnell a little bit scary too. And as the various doctors got less and less scary, so I think I became less and less interested. So, analyse that, I think, as the expression goes. But I remember watching Doctor Who as a child and being genuinely terrified by it. I was the classic kid who hid behind the sofa. And I remember one time I was watching the Cybermen. I couldn't tell you which episodes they were, but I was watching the Cybermen, and we had this terrible old black and white television. All our televisions were awful. You could barely see on any of them because we didn't have any money, and we always had terrible kit. Anyway, I was hiding behind the sofa, and our television started to smoke. It was on fire in the middle of an episode with the Cybermen in, and I think effectively I pissed my pants. Whether I did actually piss my pants, I don't know. But the memory of the utter terror and fear of watching Doctor Who and the smoke coming out of the back of the television has never really left me. So I'm picking Gunfighters, obviously, because my dad was in it. Now, I don't really remember watching it at the time, I have to be honest. In fact, the first time I remember watching it was in the 1990s, and I have not watched it since then. And around about 1997, I got, I think, my first live-action television writing gig, and I was writing children's ward for Granada, the old company Granada, and back in the day. And I went into the writers' room. We didn't call them writers' rooms in those days. It was just rooms with writers in. They were just a room. Writer's room is a modern affectation. And anyway, I bumped into a young writer, and I was young too, by the name of Paul Cornell, who, of course, later went on to write some books for himself. And Paul's absolutely lovely, and I'd never met him before, and we started talking, and within about 30 seconds probably, he worked out who I was, even though I'd changed my name. It was Martin Jameson, but I was born Martin Jacobs, but he knew I'd changed my name. He knew exactly who I was. This is when I first discovered the phenomenon of the Whovian, or the person who's terrifically enthusiastic about Doctor Who, because he knew a lot about me. In fact, I should go on to say that when I first met Toby, which was where he was warming up for a recording of University Challenge. He knew more about me than I knew about me. Someone introduced us, and he started telling me things about me that I didn't even know. So that's how these things roll. Anyway, Paul, he said, "Oh my God, yes, you're Martin Jameson. Your father's Anthony Jacobs. Your brother's Matthew Jacobs. Blah 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 blah." And he said, "Gunfighters. Oh, I love Gunfighters. Some people don't really like Gunfighters, but I absolutely love it." I said, "Well, I haven't really seen it." So the next day, well, our second day in the writers' room, or the room with writers, he arrived with what I can only guess was a sort of pirated VHS of Gunfighters, and he just gave it to me. He said, "Well, you have to have it. How can you be Martin Jacobs and not have a copy of your father's episodes?" And so that's how I first saw it. And I have to confess, I have not watched it since. So this is what I'm going to do now. And apparently what I'm going to do is talk about it. So here we go. I'm just turning it on now. And I'm going to play it. And, oh, here we go. This is terribly, terribly exciting.
Haha, well, what a lovely introduction from Martin Jameson there, who, as he mentioned, I first met when he was in the audience of University Challenge, but I'd heard talk of him before. It's funny how all roads lead to Doctor Who, and I remember talking to Darren Thomas, who's a friend of mine, who I first met because he came to see Moth St. My Doctor Who scarf, I think. Anyway, I've seen Darren a few times, and he mentioned, because Darren had worked on Holby City, was working on Holby City at the time, he said, "Oh, there's a scriptwriter who works for us called Martin Jameson, who is the son of Anthony Jacobs, not that son, the other son, not the TV movie son, but there's another son." And without even thinking about it, that obviously went into my mental storehouse. And then I was warming up University Challenge, which I did for many years. They don't have a warm-up man anymore. I was I think the second and last, because an old fellow had done it for years and years and years, and then I took over and did it until the money ran out. First they came for the audience's orange juice, then they came for the set designer being present on recording days, and then they came for me. But a nice thing to do, although I was fairly surplus to requirements. I'm sure you've seen the show. The audience aren't exactly in a frenzy. I was just there to distract them. But I think it was seen as somewhat coarse if I did too much. So I was deliberately quite low-key. TV warm-up is not really my style. Anyway, I would chat to the audience. And it was a lovely job and a lovely environment. And for some reason, I can't remember, but it just does, doesn't it? Doctor Who cropped up, and this young woman in the audience said, "Oh, his dad was in Doctor Who." And I can't remember how it happened, but I said, "I think, something like You in the Business," or something like that. But it came up that he was a writer, and I went, "Oh, God, how?" Or a writer for Holby City even. And I went, "Oh, yes, you're Martin Jameson, your dad's Anthony Jacobs." And he went, "Did you know that?" I was just like, "It's in there." Yeah, because it certainly, however the conversation arose, I was able to show off. And that's, of course, a great icebreaker. And it's lovely when somebody knows who you are, even if it's via the fact that your dad was Stock Holiday in Doctor Who. But what he doesn't say in the story is the person that introduced us was, I think, must have been one of his students or whatever, or somebody he was teaching or mentoring, because it was young Dolly Rose Campbell, who is now a big star of Coronation Street, and brilliant she is too. So, and I, of course, now see and know her because she's a colleague of my partner Shez. So it's all a funny small world that all melds together. So there's a weird synthesis there of Holby City / Doctor Who, which led to me, Doctor Who / Coronation Street, which led to Dolly Rose, who's Coronation Street / sitting next to Martin from Holby City. So this curious thing. So there's just an illustration of the strange set of circumstances that led to this edition of Happy Times and Places, featuring the son of the star, one of the guest stars of the story in question. You know what? They may have had primitive technology when this was aired back in the day, but it's now some god-awful hour. I'm so behind with my podcasting. I'm determined to get an episode done tonight, and I was going to fire up the BritBox, but, in the old days, if you wanted to turn on the telly, you turn on the telly. You want a channel, you'd press the button. Hey, presto. It may not have been a gorgeous picture. Do you know what I mean? You may have had to fiddle with the aerial a little bit, but you pressed a button and you got what you wanted, essentially. I've switched on my thing to just fire up BritBox. It's going, no, it's not there now. Want to sign up for a 7-day trial? And I'm like, no, I pay for it. And I've searched on the internet and that's actually ended up taking me longer than it would have taken me to get up, get the DVD out and put it in the Blu-ray player, which I've now done. But after trying to sort out the BritBox problem, because that's going to niggle me. I will dream about solving the BritBox problem and will wake up in the morning and it will be unsolved, but I won't remember. I'll only remember when I come to do this again tomorrow night and I've settled into my chair, and then I realise I have to get up and mess around again. But that's first world problems, but they're still really bloody annoying. So here, technology people, just have that you can press buttons and things work and things don't disappear. I'm not wild about all this, how we're so reliant on the internet. I think it breaks deliberately to irritate us. And to distract us from the fact that it's slowly closing in and will destroy us all. But that's just my theory. So I'm going back to a time when Doctor Who didn't necessarily have to do science fiction, because science fiction has things like wirelessly connected evil entertainment repositories of doom, and would do historical stories. But the seriousness of a lot of the historical stories occasionally gave way to those of a more humorous bent. And I've recently done the Romans. I've rushed this forward in proceedings just because I was talking to Martin and because I liked his introduction and because that's what I'm in the mood to do tonight. I'd got another story scheduled for tonight and I didn't fancy doing it. And these things depend on me being able to produce words. So I fancied doing the Gunfighters. A much maligned story. I mean, that's the introduction for me, that I grew up knowing this as the bad Doctor Who story. There weren't many in Doctor Who: A Celebration and the Radio Times Doctor Who 20th Anniversary Special. Poorly drawn versions of, what was it, Doc Holliday, Bette Masterson and Wyatt Earp said the 20th Anniversary Special, which was only, I think, otherwise rude about the Underwater Menace when it said the fish people weren't perhaps the greatest monsters. And then Doctor Who: A Celebration, which described this as not good. It is not good, it is bad, and it is ugly, and could be described as the worst Doctor Who story of all time. The acting is not so much West Coast as West Ham, which was a joke I didn't get for many years. I just thought it was saying West Ham to be, I didn't get the ham element of that put down. And I think the Gunfight, I mean, the Doctor Who magazine has just done its survey where it's releasing the results in Doctor Order, and the Gunfighters is pretty close to the bottom. I mean, it's not bottom, it's not worst Doctor Who story of all time, but I don't think its reputation has ever quite recovered from the received wisdom that it's awful. And I know a lot of people who genuinely do think this is bad, but I think that's I think it's misunderstood. I mean, you can't legislate for people's taste, but I do think that this story has was always on the back foot, really. But that said, that means that I might be prepared to give it more of a chance than I might otherwise, because I quite like the idea of championing the underdog. So I can never come to it purely either. I come to it with the received wisdom that it's the worst Doctor Who story of all time. So of course I want to go, oh, actually, but it has virtues all of its own that the hoi polloi cannot understand. So therefore I might not. I don't like the fact that I might, but I have to grudgingly suggest that my subconscious might have a bit of that going on with it, because my subconscious is a terrible snob. So it's one that's odd for me to have an honest appraisal of, because it comes with so much baggage that I'm sort of fighting against. But I tend to enjoy the Gunfighters. I think it's unfairly maligned, and I think it's got a lot to recommend it. And so with that in mind, this may seem odd to sort of people of generations below me, going, why this big intro? Because this was the 20th anniversary of Doctor Who. There was the idea that there might be a classic, an old Doctor Who story that wasn't good. This was revolutionary stuff. We tended to look back with great joy and appreciation and awe, which I know seems odd these days when everybody tends to look back at history and either scold the people that existed there or patronise them. We were quite in awe of the people that came before us and the programmes that were made. So I quite enjoyed that myself. Anyway, let us watch the worst Doctor Who story of all time. It's not. In the company of the son of one of its main players. I'm thrilled that Martin is. Martin, by the way, is an extremely good and prolific writer. He's written loads for radio. He's written many episodes of Holby City and much else besides. So, and I know Matthew a little bit as well. And I've interviewed Matthew for my Who's Round podcast. So it's nice to get the other brother to give his perspective. I think that's fun. So let us, and Martin has been doing some very good reviews as well online. He's always, he's always worth. Martin's an excellent, sometimes very caustic reviewer of current television, not just for online websites, but also for on his own Facebook page, where I'm always eager to see what he's made of the latest television program. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure reading Martin without much sort of filter, just saying what he thinks, but always very entertainingly so. So I think we're in for a ride. I'm really pleased that Martin has taken part, even though it's ridiculous o'clock in the morning. I am gonna very much enjoy watching this first episode of the Gunfighters, and I'm going to press play on my DVD, which is why you can hear the menu going on in the background, in 3, 2, 1. Isn't it gorgeous seeing those beautiful opening titles, the beginning of which was lifted from a production of Tobias and the Angel, which was directed by Rudolph Cartier in 1960. I'm reminded of that because I've just been editing my chapter on Rudolph Cartier for my Quatermass book, and I managed to get it down from 22,000 words to 20,000 words, which, seeing as it's got to be 15,000 words, is probably not what I'd consider a good day's work. Anyway, what a great opening shot of Through the Wagon. I mean, one of the suggestions in Doctor Who Celebration was that the direction of this story was not very good. The script is pure Talbot Rothwell, it said. What does it say about the direction? I can't remember. The acting is more West Ham than West Coast. Can't remember what it says about the direction, but look, that's a great shot through a wagon. We got some lovely film. Barry Newbury's sets are actually astonishing. And you've got horses in the studio. This is all good stuff. And here we have the Clanton brothers, who for years and years, British actors, for some reason, couldn't do American. I don't know why. And the idea of a British actor doing American, there were few who specialised, people like Michael Balfour, for example. But largely, if they wanted Americans, they tried to get Americans or at least Canadians, because it was an accent that seemed to be at odds with sort of largely classically trained, let's be honest, British actors, and maybe that's why that it's American intonation and phraseology and drawl is counterintuitive if you're somebody that's been working very hard, because even regionally accented actors had to RP up. So maybe that was why. But I remember Gary Oldman was one of the sort of first who went, who latterly, of the more modern actors, you went, oh, he can really do American, wow. But whereas now, American TV is full of British actors. And often now as well, a lot of American productions have British actors, playing Americans. Because if you're not on a Screen Actors Guild contract, you are a lot cheaper, particularly in terms of residuals. But that's a story for another day. This is beautiful quality. It's lovely to see. I love Dodo's outfit. That's a really funky outfit. I love her cap. Look at that lovely aerial shot. But yes, the American accents, I think, do hamper this production slightly. But it is a time when, and they did try and get a lot of American actors or Canadian actors. I know they looked at Cecil Linder and Donald Sutherland to do this. And in fact, John Alderson, who plays Wyatt Earp, was flown over from Hollywood. He is British. He was British. Which would have made things easier, but he was based in Hollywood and he worked in Hollywood. And you've got Shane Rimmer there, who's Canadian, and his accent is clearly genuine and authentic. I know there's a slight difference between Canadian and American accents, but he stands out here as being the real deal. I mean, he knows how to stand. He knows how to he knows how to deliver. He knows how to stand and deliver in a way that I have to say, the Clanton brothers, who are quite a bunch. Now, he doesn't like being called Snake Eyes, whereas in the book there's a whole thing about that, where he's this sort of ugly reptilian kind of thing. But there's not really much of that in the screenplay. So we have the Clanton brothers. Maurice Good, who ended up being in Canada, is Phineas Clanton, and he gives the character a stutter. In order to give it a bit of characterization, I have a slight in real life. In real life, when I'm not performing, I have something. I'm doing it now. I have a bit of a stammer myself, but which curiously I tend to be able to overcome in performance more than in real life, except when I'm conscious of it, where I'm now battling against it. I'm not offended by him giving the character a stammer. You do anything you can as an actor in those days to make your performance slightly memorable. And he's in the film of Quatermass and the Pit, and I kept meaning to write to him, and I did get his address in Canada, and then I discovered, and then he died. I don't know why the Doctor's got a collection of guns, but I mean, you can be a person of non-violence and still appreciate the mechanics of a gun. Peter, I think you're smashing too, Peter Purvis. I love this. Might be Jackie Lane's best story as well. I love Stephen and Dodo in this. Peter Purvis is so versatile. He can adapt his performance style to whatever the story requires, and he does so with great elan. I love the Bible bashing Wyatt Earp, played by John Alderson, who is very much the genuine article. And he died in a actor's retirement home in Chicago, but he's in Blazing Saddles, for goodness sake. And he was a sort of cowboy type. I remember Richard Beale, who plays Bat Masterson, telling us that Alderson had stayed with him and burnt holes in his carpet. But he crops up in British TV all the time. He comes back to he's in one of the Beiderbecke serials with James Bolam and Barbara Flynn. But he's great. It's a lovely set, this as well. I like Stephen and Dodo look great in their cowboy costumes. Nice that you can see the wagon outside. Here's Sheena Marsh. Now, she's somebody that we struggled to get hold of. She never replied. She's in The Girl Who Was Death, the Prisoner episode, and she only died. Shane Rimmer and William Herndl, who plays Ike Clanton, all died in the same year. But Sheena Marsh, nobody ever got a reply from her. Her real name was Shirley Knight. Shirley Knight. I've got some footage of her doing something else. Her husband was a keep fit judo guy whose name escapes me right now. But I compiled a whole load of stuff about Sheena Marsh, but we never got anything out of her. And this is David Cole. There's another David Cole who's an extra in some Davison stories, who was then acting a bit in the UK in the 80s. But by this time, this David Cole had gone to New Zealand. And you do see him pop up. He was in a telefilm that I saw. So he was sort of still about, and yet not quite available to us. And I think, bless him, he's terrible in this. He opened a donkey sanctuary, I think. I think Sheena Marsh is great fun. I wish I knew more about her. I wish she... Because for years there was a rumour that she was Rex Tucker's daughter, the director Rex Tucker's daughter, but she's not, because I think Rex Tucker said in an interview, "Oh yes, and my daughter was in it," and people put two and two together and made 4 things which were wrong, because his daughter is Jane Tucker of Rod, Jane and Freddie fame, and she is a non-speaking artiste in certainly the last episode. Here is the man himself, Anthony Jacobs, who is wearing a wig there. If you see him in other stuff, he's a bald-headed man, an excellent voice man, a very famous radio actor by this point. His name was very well known. If you listen to the Wireless in the 1960s, you would know Anthony Jacobs. He at this point, he and John Alderson are the sort of main billed guest stars. I think they get the billing in the Radio Times. Lawrence Payne then takes top guest billing when he arrives. But yeah, I like the way he does that, and he gives Holiday a real sort of ratty delivery. I like it. He's really playing a character here. He's a proper character actor, Anthony Jacobs, and I think he invests Doc Holliday with a sort of a spikiness that actually also makes him very lovable. And she's good fun. She's got a lot of energy, and I love all the costumes. It's that famous idea, isn't it, that that's a lovely shot as well of having the feet of Bat Masterson and full length of the studio, and then the camera's tracking across, and then you've got a high shot. That's these camera positionings of Rex Tucker, I think, are rather good. Now I love Richard Beale here, who's a sort of pugnacious sort of bulldog of an actor. He's just been the Refusion voice in The Ark. He's the propaganda voice in The Macra Terror. He turns up as the Minister of Ecology in The Green Death because he was great friends with the director Michael Bryant, because he's a great man of the sea. Now, Richard only died a couple of years ago at the age of something like 94, 96, and was still going strong. He used to phone up any answers. I remember when we did the voice test, I was desperate for him to be on the commentary, and I'm glad we got him on, because he's had such a long career. And I wrote to him to do a Who's Round, and he said, yes, you should interview me. I've been in lots of things, but I will have nothing to do. And I said, we put it out free on the internet. He said, I will have nothing to do with the internet because of identity theft and all of that sort of thing. He obviously got it into his head. He was rattled by the idea of the internet, which was a shame, and I didn't pursue it because he lived sort of in the middle of nowhere, and we did have him on the commentary for this, at least. I wish we'd done a making of for this one, but the way that the DVDs were run in those days meant that corners were cut, unnecessarily, which means that we had loads of people available who we could have got on camera, and we didn't. But yeah, Beale was a fascinating guy, but he had quite a cussed sense of humour. I remember when we did the voice check for the commentary, you say, "What did you have for breakfast?" And he said, "I had a rancid sausage roll, which was awful at the train station." I really liked him, but. He was somebody who would not let a terse comment by if there was one to be made. I like the rapport he has with Wyatt Earp. I think that these two have an established relationship, which is rather nice. And I interrupted myself earlier by saying, there's that thing of, the UK can't do Westerns, and it's not a genre that you would ever sort of seek to be made over here, because America, well, and then the spaghetti westerns, of course, they've been done elsewhere, and in exemplary fashion elsewhere by the Americans and the Italians. It's not necessarily our métier in the same way that I particularly want to watch something set in a 1920s British drawing room, made in the States. That's the hurdles overcome at both ends seem unnecessary to even try when they can be done better elsewhere. But Doctor Who, of course, has to try everything, and I don't see it doing a Western as any worse than it trying anything else, from space opera to action adventure or whatever. I think these two have a great rapport, and I think Jackie Lane, who is not the world's greatest actress, is good fun in this. The way that Donald Cotton writes Dodo as somebody sort of plucky and amused by it all is she rises to the occasion. And their roles were slightly swapped over, weren't they? Because she was supposed to be singing and Stephen playing the piano. Jackie just went, I'm not singing. And Jackie, like Martin Jameson, I met Jackie Lane under very strange circumstances. I saw her on a train. I'm sure I've told this story before, so let's just leave it at that. But the one companion I was never going to meet when we were doing the DVDs or at any Doctor Who event, fate brought me together with on a train on the way to Manchester, and we had a bit of a chat and exchanged emails thereafter. And I was so sorry when she died, because she was something of an enigma. I love the tooth outside Doc Holliday's surgery. That is a lovely joke, and their treatment of Hartnell's brilliant here. Look, he's enduring all of this rather brilliantly without pulling focus. He's a very good comedy performer, and I love the. And why has the Doctor gone to the Wild West to get his tooth out? Well, it's because he doesn't know where he's going, of course. But I think you'd go, I might have to hang on. And have you got nothing in the TARDIS either? It doesn't matter. I mean, it's a comedy. That's the whole thing of it. But we can make up our own reasons for he's got carried away in the situation and he really needs his tooth out now. And that is a fantastic joke. I never touch alcohol. What will I do? And he has a drink. And there's a real edge to Holiday as well. He's funny, and I like the way he's sort of very welcoming of the Doctor. But when he says I've not tolerated any complaints yet, there's a real edge. This is a man who's gunned people down for crossing him, and that's never far away. Even though he's a sort of scoundrel and a charmer, Doc Holliday, but he's great. And I think this for what for a show that and indeed television at this time that struggles to sometimes pull off popular scenes or senses of time and place in a small BBC studio. I think that I buy this bar setting. Dave, again, that's a lovely high shot that's afforded to us by the high stairs. Oh, that's on film now. The shooting of the bottles. I will talk about William Hurndall, who plays Ike Clanton, at some point, but we've got 4 episodes. Yeah, I was in touch with. Well, he was again somebody we couldn't track down when we were doing the DVD, but I did manage to get hold of him. That's great that David Graham decides to emerge from behind the counter. I find the accent he's doing. Did he say he said he was doing Walter Brennan, who was a famous Western actor? I think he stuffed his cheeks with cotton wool and gives you this kind of funny performance. I wonder if it's a piece of character acting too far. I mean, David Graham, who, as I record this, is still doing Grandpa Pig from his own home. There was a lovely picture of him on Twitter the other day. He's in his mid to late 90s now, and is a legend and still working. But I would say that both his Professor Kerensky in City of Death and his Charlie the Barman, turn the character acting up to 11. And And this is, I mean, Donald Cotton is a very witty writer, isn't he? There's a brilliant documentary online about Donald Cotton that's gone into great detail and tracked down some of his friends and former colleagues. And of course, you think of somebody who's so witty like Cotton as blowing into Doctor Who, doing it not perhaps quite getting how it was normally done, but because he was witty and better than it or whatever. But actually, he didn't write an awful lot else for television, and was sort of a bit in the doldrums as a sort of character actor in regional theatre. Whereas I sort of imagine people come in, do Doctor Who, and then go off and have marvellous lives, or I did when I was younger. But of course, life is different to that. William Herndl there did a lot of modelling, did a few cigarette adverts. Very handsome man, very interesting life. Terrible actor. I mean, I think these two, Bill Herndl here, who I had great times with, and David Cole are really bad. But if anything can stand a bad performance, it's this, because it is this heightened pastiche. It's almost because it's a Western being done in the UK, you need a couple of not very good actors, not being very American. So it's not everybody's got the handle on how to do this properly, but that means that the people like Jacobs and John Alderson doing it are a real treat. And Rimmer's great. That you sort of wish they could have got a few more of the genuine article. And this is Donald Cotton at his witty best. Doc, what? Holiday. And of course it's called A Holiday for the Doctor because Doc Holliday the Doctor gets mistaken for Doc Holliday, a holiday for the Doctor. So, which is all good. And it's great that Holliday, again, who's been charming, and they've been very welcoming and hospitable to the Doctor, is now absolutely prepared to set him up for a fatal encounter in the pub down the road. Now, and I haven't even mentioned the Ballad of the Last Chart Saloon, sung by Linda Barron, who's also now no longer with us. Gosh, remember when this was a story where we had so many people from. We should have made a documentary for it then. We should have had the budget to do that. So that's, anyway, come on. Cannot regret too many things, but I regret that. Your enjoyment of this story depends on whether you like the ballad or not. I think the ballad is great fun. I think one of the joys of classic Doctor Who, on the day actually that I record this, when Murray Gold has been announced as returning to Doctor Who, and I love Murray Gold, and I love the fact that I liked Segun Akinola as well, but I love Murray Gold, and I think he understands and scores the programme very well. So I'm not complaining that we have a single composer, but I equally like the fact that in old Doctor Who, a composer could, a new composer could come in, or a regular composer, the same to you and many of them. That's a good joke. That's great. Could come in and respond to the story as they wanted it to, as they thought. Tristram Carey, who wrote the score for this, nice high staircase, even though it's got a very wobbly banister. Although it probably would actually in the Wild West, wouldn't it? I'm not sure in the same way that people would pause at the stairs waiting for the queue in the same way that those guys do. But Tristram Carey did the score, that wonderful discordant alien score for the Daleks, and then a couple of years later he's doing this, is it Cat Ballou pastiche, where you have the action being sung over. And again, I think for a Doctor Who story, to go, right, let's for this one story, let's the incidental music be this, and the director's gone for it because Rex Tucker wrote extra verses, and I think it's a rather charming addition because it's Doctor Who being the same yet different, and this This is still a Doctor Who adventure. It's witty. It's got jeopardy. It's got time travel, but it's also very silly and good fun. And Purvis is brilliant. He's having to sing, which is a pain in the arse. While Jackie Lane mimes at the piano, the tinkling of Tom McCall. And he does that wonderful comic double take, and he's clearly not wanting to. I don't think it's the best orchestrated cliffhanger. I know the suggestion is, they're waiting and they're going to blast the Doctor as he comes through the door, but I don't think the cliffhanger sells that particularly well, because they go out on the song, Don't Shoot the Pianist. It's a great episode title, though. I think that rattles along. I think that is a lot of good fun. And yeah, what a bunch of actors who all, as I say, not that long ago, 10 years ago, when we were doing all of this stuff, most of these actors were still with us. Ballad Music by Tristram Carey, sung by Linda Barron. There's Gladys Emanuel, Captain Rack. Well, I think there's a lot in that, and I think it's all jolly fun, and it's definitely not the worst Doctor Who story of all time. And it looks beautiful on the DVD that I have, nicely cleaned up from when I first saw it on fairly rough VHS. So, what is my favourite thing about? I mean, it's even got a Doctor Who joke, hasn't it? I am Dr. Caligari. What is it? Dodo Dupont, Wizard of the Ivory Keys. I think I've used Wizard of the Ivory Keys. Yes, we have sometimes have live piano music at XS Malarkey, my comedy club, on a Tuesday night, from the lovely JK, and I've occasionally described Jay as the Wizard of the Ivory Keys, because it is a good description. I love Donald Cotton's take on Doctor Who. And again, he seems so carefree because he's such an easy dispenser of wit. And then when I heard this documentary that I'll give you the details of at some point during this 4-part Happy Times and Places, is actually a slightly sadder life than that, and one riddled with financial insecurity and too much alcohol, which is all too familiar a story. And I was fascinated by this documentary and admiring of its work, and the work and research that had got into it. And part of me went, oh, I wish I didn't know that. I'd got him as this sort of lofty untouchable, and of course he was just as flawed and disappointed and knackered as the rest of us. But he stands as a witty, a totem for irreverence in Doctor Who, and that's no bad thing. And actually, these days, when I think sometimes we can be prone to take Doctor Who too seriously, somebody who goes, "Oh no, it's about someone who travels through time and space in a police box." We can throw a bit of humour into the mix because it's daring us to. Now, that's not to say that Doctor Who should have the piss taken out of it, but what it is doing, it is having a very tongue-in-cheek look at the genre, and yet it's doing other elements of the genre quite nicely. I also like the fact that the Doctor doesn't drink in this, actually, when having just talked about Cotton's later propensity to imbibe. And as somebody who's been known to indulge in the cups myself, I rather like the fact that the Doctor is teetotal. It makes it, if the Doctor does it, it makes it seem somehow not a compromise. It makes it seem a pretty cool choice for somebody who, it's my hero, travels through space and time, and he doesn't bother with alcohol. I like that. It's a nice little subtle note. Sends out a little subtle message to the kids. I also like the fact that Pertwee appreciates his fine wine and drinks a scotch whilst twatting a gorilla in Day of the Daleks. So again, you can like two contrasting things at once. So I'm trying to think what. This is going to be really hard because Martin, one, isn't a fan, and two, obviously, he's got a personal stake in this. I mean, Anthony Jacobs is one of my favourite things in this. I do like the scene in the dentists. I like Anthony Jacobs as Doc Holliday. I like John Alderson as Wyatt Earp. I think the sets are fantastic. I do like the ballad, and I like the Doctor Who joke. And it's funny when because that shot of Bat Masterson with Wyatt and Stephen and Dodo and the Doctor, that was the picture that accompanied the descriptor of the Gunfighters as the worst Doctor Who story ever in Doctor Who, a celebration. So I always associate that scene with the Gunfighters being supposedly bad. And then loads of pictures were in the Doctor Who archives. But I thought, when I saw those pictures come out, because they had sort of different groupings, Anthony Jacobs was in one of the pictures, I think with David Cole and John Alderson, maybe. They sort of mixed up the groupings. But I remember thinking that maybe Anthony Jacobs was Seth Harper because, his features were sort of a bit sort of rattlesnakey, snake eyesy Harper. And I didn't know what Anthony Jacobs looked like. I mean, he actually doesn't look much like Anthony Jacobs in that anyway, because he's got a false moustache and a wig on. So it was only when I saw it that I, discovered which characters were which. But there's actually loads of really nice pictures of the various different cast members of the Gunfighters, I have to say. Right ho, my favourite thing, and of course he's hurt his tooth, the Doctor, from eating one of Cyril's sweets at the end of the Celestial Toymaker. I mean, what a show! It goes from the Ark, which is this sort of hard sci-fi. I love the Ark, by the way. To the Celestial Toymaker, which is this sort of surreal, nightmarish take on, parlour games, to the Gunfighters, which is a Western pastiche. And I know it's an uncomfortable fit for Innes Lloyd and Jerry Davis, who I think were much happier with, bases full of, tough talking types and international crews and, sci-fi for starters. But it's all come from the sort of fertile and ambitious minds of John Wiles and Donald Tosh, who I think are quite an odd pairing for Doctor Who. Obviously, Wiles not getting on with William Hartnell, and they spend most of their time having to do the Daleks' master plan, which they'd have inherited. So we have this funny period where they sort of throw all sorts of different things at the wall, and we get this really quite bizarre, but I think really interesting and eclectic period of Doctor Who that is all too short for me. I would have been interested to see what more they could have done with the show. So my favourite thing in episode 1 of the Gunfighters is, I think what struck me about that the most this time around is, I mean, I think it's a very handsome production. I think the sets are fantastic. I think they're doing to do a Western. I know there's some Ealing shooting as well, but you have horses in the studio. I mean, that's incredible. To do a Western in with the resources that the BBC had, and to do one that actually looks so good, and those high angles and the shots through the shots through wheels or from foot level. He does really interesting things with his camera angles. Does Tucker in the studio, and on film his cameraman is Ken Westbury, who's a fantastic cameraman. So is it the fact that it looks good, that it looks like they have a decent stab at doing a Western in the studio? Costumes were all great. Yeah, I'm going to stick up for the production, because again, when this was written up, it was, the whole thing was bad. Well, actually, just looking at the nitty-gritty of it, it's handsomely mounted, brilliant set design, costumes all work, it looks good. It's a good production. It's a decent stab at a West, which is the main thing that it's supposed to be, is a Western in a BBC studio. and I think it pulls that off. Considering it's also a comedy western, you could have cut corners and gone, well, it is a jokey one. They haven't cut corners. They've very ambitiously, Barry Newbury, the set designer, kudos to him, mounted it without the tongue in their cheek. They've not made any compromises because, well, it's only a comedy. So I think the fact that it looks much better than it should, and that's a synthesis of the direction, the shooting. I think it is interestingly shot. The costumes, the set design. It's a handsome production. It's a decent production. It looks like a Western, or it looks like as good a Western as the BBC could be expected to do in 1966. However, I'm sure Martin, who is a very smart guy, has chosen something completely different. So, A Holiday for the Doctor, through the lens of the son of that holiday. Let's see what he has to say.
Okay, so I've just finished episode 1, which is called The Holiday for the Doctor. And of course, the reason my dad was cast in this, aside from the fact that he was a well-respected character actor at the time, was that he looked a good deal like William Hartnell. And of course, the story hinges on mistaken identity, Doctor, Doc, Holiday, and all that kind of thing. And it was really fun watching it. I've heard people be terribly rude about the song, but I rather like it. And it's very beautifully shot. I mean, you can see the painted backcloths and all that kind of stuff. But Rex Tucker, is it, who directed it, has done a great job. He's obviously been watching High Noon, and so, with his limited resources, he's got the camera down low, and there's some deep focus stuff that, looks quite classy. I mean, yeah, there are some terrible American accents. There really are. And on that theme, although I don't particularly remember it myself at the time, when I was about 12, I went on a holiday with my dad, and he talked a lot about it, which actually had a great influence on me. Later on, I became a theatre director and a radio producer. And of course, he took everything very seriously. He was a classically trained actor. And he was on the radio rep for the BBC for many years. And he took acting incredibly seriously. And it's interesting to watch in relation to this episode because while some of them are taking it seriously, William Hartnell's taking it seriously, and a couple of the others, some of these actors look, let's be honest, they look like they're slumming it a bit, and their American accents are pretty dodgy. But my dad talked to me in at great length about the accent because he was meticulous in his research. So he knew that Doc Holliday, I think, was born in Georgia, and he'd moved to Philadelphia. But in the script, they talk about his dad being in Alabama. And, he was used to researching accents for all the radio plays that he was in. And he was in hundreds, if not thousands, of radio plays. And he said, well, the thing was, in the whenever this is, 1870s, whatever year it was, I can't remember, you're in Tombstone, Arizona. What's the accent? And he said, well, the thing was, there wasn't really an American accent in the way we understand now, and there's very little record of it. And this really frustrated him because what he would have liked to have done is have an accent that was accurate to the time. But then he said, well, of course, nobody would understand that because they see the accents as coming from Western movies. So I think he said in the end he went for something from Oklahoma, is my memory, but I may have got this wrong. Anyway, he got tapes, and he went and consulted whoever you consulted in those days at the BBC about accents, and he worked very hard on his accent, and you can see he's playing the character for real. Which is lovely. He never hammed anything in his life. I mean, he was quite a big, bold actor of his time. He was never a method actor, but he took acting very seriously. And what really amuses me watching it is, I may be reading too much into this, and I'm sure you guys all know a lot more about this than I do. But I really sense that William Hartnell, obviously, who's come into acting through a different route, but has a massive amount of experience. I sort of sense that he knows that he has a very well-trained, serious actor that he's sharing the screen with. And to me, it looks like an act-off. But there you go. I may be wrong, but at times that's what it looks like. And I really love that. And it's really fun to see. I have to be honest, I haven't really got a clue what's going on. There's something about, there's going to be Wyatt Earp and the Clayton boys or something, and they're going to do some stuff. And there's going to be a gunfight, and there's mistaken identity. However, I have a request. You see, I have a memory of there being an amazing production still photograph of my dad as Doc Holliday, poised over the dentist's chair with William Hartnell, and about to take his tooth out. And that shot isn't really in the episode. My dad had it. I don't know where it is. It doesn't appear in my brother's film. I don't have a copy of it. I have looked online. I can't find it. If anybody has got this photograph, and you want to do me a great favour, I would love a good resolution copy of that still. I'm sure I haven't misremembered it. My memory is pretty good, even though I'm fairly ancient. Okay, so I'm now going to watch the second episode, which is called "Don't Shoot the Pianist" or the piano player or something. So here I go. Here we go. Is it going to come on now? Come on, play. Yay. Oh no, it's always. It's telling me what I've got to do.
There are 5 options.
Yeah, I know there are 5 options. Thank you. Can you just tell me? Here we go. Yeah, here it is. Don't shoot the pianist. Here I go. Right, toodly-dum. I love this theme tune. I know you all love this theme tune, but I don't like the new theme tune with the orchestra. I like this theme tune that sounds like it's playing on rubber bands. This is my idea of a theme tune.
I'm not cutting any of that out. Well, I'm very much enjoying Martin's contribution. Did we choose the same thing? I don't know that we did. I don't know. I think this one might not be scored in the traditional way, because Martin didn't specify one particular thing. He chose a number of different things, as did I, some of which were the same, some of which were different. So however you're scoring this, you must choose. I don't remember a photo. There are a lot of photos of the Gunfighters, but I've got the most of the ones that I've seen are from the filming, although actually that one of Brad Masterson and that I just described but in Doctor and a Celebration is that's from the studio. So, but I don't recall one from of the Doc Holliday with the dentist chair. So I would say, Martin, if your dad did keep it, have a look. He might have the only copy, and that's not unusual. I know I've known other people from BBC Productions, who've taken photos away or been given photos that have turned out to be the copies that the BBC didn't have. So I've got a couple from the Savages that Kay Patrick had been given by somebody, which have been in Doctor Which. As soon as I got them, I donated to Doctor Who magazine, and because I'm not that guy, and I've got a couple from Quatermass in the Pit from Cease Linder, who was considered for a role, Canadian actor who plays Dr. Roney in Quatermass in the Pit, who was considered for a role in the Gunfighters, and he'd taken a couple of photos away that aren't in the BBC's collection, that are also on the Blu-ray of Quatermass in the Pit, because I'm not that guy. But I don't recall any of Doc Holliday over the Doctor and the in the dentist chair, which also I would probably choose as my favourite scene of that. I love the bit where he takes a drink, and I like the bit where they sort of tease the doctor and the rapport between Doc and Kate, and the way that they very wittily engage with the doctor, and the way that Hartnell responds to that, I think is the best exchange in an episode that's got some nice sort of back and forths and interplay between everybody. And I do agree with Martin that Hartnell responds very well. You see Tom Baker do it as well. If there's an actor that he respects, he's very deferent to Beatrix Lehman in The Stones of Blood. If there's an actor he respects, he just checks himself. And if there's an actor he's not wild about, Tom Baker can be a bit dismissive. But I think Hartnell certainly engages very well with Anthony Jacobs, and those scenes are great. I hadn't considered that actually one of the reasons for Jacobs' casting was because he's has a similar look to Hartnell, but actually I can see that now. Their faces are a similar kind of shape, but I hadn't really considered that, which makes actually more sense of the storyline of the mistaking, rather than just, oh, it's a guy in a dentist shop and I say Doc and he says yes. But I mean, I quite like that anyway. I think the mistaken identity stuff is quite fun, and of course you can get away with it in Western times because there aren't pictures and ID cards and all of that sort of thing. You would have wanted posters up, but you'd have to then commit them to memory to remember what somebody looks like. I'm sure there were all sorts of injustices perpetrated based on people vaguely looking like somebody else. So I love the fact they have fun with all of that. I'm very much going to enjoy Martin's contribution to this. I can tell he's engaged with it, with all of his knowledge as an exemplar of the creative arts himself, but also with his personal insight, courtesy of his father. I was fascinated to hear that stuff about the accent, but just gives it a bit more of a personal view, doesn't it? It feels like we can almost touch it a little bit, which isn't always the case with these. So I'm delighted by the dynamic being provided by Martin. I'm delighted I chose to watch the Gunfighters after, wanting to go on some sort of spree inspired by Brit Box's appalling behaviour. And what a joy it is that something written off by fan lore as the worst Doctor Who story of all time. I know it's not thought of that now, but as I say, one that has always, I think, been somewhat bruised by fan perception and by history. And Rex Tucker, of course, was going to be the first actual producer of Doctor Who, and his name is only on the credits of 3 episodes. 3, Toby, how come? Well, we'll discuss that when we get to episode 4. Rex Tucker, though, and he was still about until, relatively, no, it's been 20 odd years, hasn't it? But he was interviewed by Doctor Who magazine at least, and got bits and bobs out of him. But yeah, I think, and he was great friends with, I remember Richard Beale talking about my great friend Rex. So lots of characters on display. Oh, what fun it must have been to have hung around. And the Mirror Pics did a load of pictures, didn't they? But those were of the rehearsals. So I wonder if but I don't think there's any of Anthony Jacobs in those. I'll go and have a mooch and look for some photographs for Martin. I will also dig out the details of that excellent Donald Cotton documentary, but not right now because it's way past my bedtime, and I need to go and brush my teeth because if I don't, I might end up in all sorts of trouble. Well, that's the end of episode 1. They think the Doctor's Doc. Next week I'll give you an anecdote about Errol Flehin's... Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Martin Jameson, who can be found on Twitter at SmartArts, SmartArtz, at SmartArts, and His website is at ninjamarmoset.com, and his writings and thoughts are all fascinating and very funny and very smartly rendered. So check those out. I'm grateful to Martin, of course, and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Joel Aarons, Joanne Abbott, Keith Adams, Mark Aldridge, Kit Allen, Neil Allen, Jonathan Appleton, Sebastian April, Tilt Eraser, Reddit Aritza, Simon Ash, Richard Alt, Richard Baker, Stephen Bamford, Simon Barker, Ollie Barrett, Andy Benison, Richard Bignell, Peter Blackett and Robin Bland. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you are enjoying these podcasts, then please go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can support them and also get them early, 6 months at least early for happy times and places, and generally a month or so early for too much information and indefinable magic, my increasingly intermittent but longer and, more sort of detailed production values, rewrites. Anyway. They're the ones that take a little bit more time, but you get them early at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You also get exclusive pictures of my dog and other bits of Bob's monthly AMAs, which have actually gone sort of bi and tri-monthly, and people seem to like and have questions, and hopefully so that's something else you get there. And it's a fairly egalitarian system. It starts from £3 a month. It goes all the way to gazillions, but I don't have any gazillion subscribers yet. I mean, I don't know if it's possible to do the gazillions. There's not a button. But, if you've got gazillions, I'll have them. If you want to give them to me, I'll have them. I won't let technology be a barrier. And you get a 10% discount, even on the gazillions, if you sign up for a year in one go. That's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. And there's also a Ko-fi, kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, for you to, bung me some coppers if you're particularly ready, willing, and able for just a one-off. You don't get any bonuses for that apart from the satisfaction of subsidising the arts. And you can also do a supportive thing that costs no money whatsoever. Oh, that's a good one, Toby. What's that? It's to go to iTunes and give these 5 stars, because that tweaks our algorithms, makes them look all pert, and makes them stand out from the crowd, makes people who may not be aware of this podcast more likely to stumble across it and then listen to it. And the more people listen to it, I don't know what that means really, apart from it makes this less a waste of mine, yours, and everybody else's time, if there's more of us in this group madness. But anyway, it's nice, and I'm grateful to everybody that listens. That's the main thing. Keep listening, keep supporting, subscribe and like and follow and all of those things, and say nice things online, and it just helps, and it makes an old man very happy as he broadcasts from his cupboard. So thank you very much. Do all of that. I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke, and these podcasts have their own stream. It's not a Twitter stream, is it? Their own Twitter smell. Yes, it's a musky smell. Their own Twitter place at Hadoke Podcasts. I'm actually on Instagram, which I'm trying to get better at, which is at toby.hadoke. Without much effort, I've sort of done okay on Twitter, and I mean Facebook. I've got I can't get any more follows, so I've now got a Facebook page. So don't try and befriend me on Facebook, but I have my page. It's still me. It's just a way of. It's just because I've clearly not weeded out any bots or people. No, you can't hide on Facebook. I'm not harbouring any killers. I don't think that's possible on Facebook. But I've just said yes to everybody, really. So my personal page is now going to need to be sort of thinned out to people I know. I mean, so I could put personal photos on there and stuff like that as well. But I do have a page for me as a comedian, I think, or as a performer. It's me. It's a black and white photo with. Oh no, I don't think it is anymore. You'll be able to tell the difference. And it's the page. It's the Facebook page, and that's still me, and it still has all my stuff on it. But it just might not have ones where I say it's Mum's birthday or whatever. So you do that on Facebook. You do the Twitter and Instagram. Yes, is the one that I would say I'm an underperformer on Instagram currently. So at Toby.Hadoke on Instagram, and we can do all this in pictorial form. Hurrah! I mean, they're actually asking me, it's been suggested I get a TikTok as well. And I mean, how many of these bloody things are there? You know, so, well, it's more content and more people will be... I'm constantly doing bloody content. I want to be in somebody else do some content, and I'll just turn up and fill the content, be the content. I'll be the content. I'll be somebody else's content. So I do TikTok. All the kids are doing it, but I'm not a kid. But maybe you want to be with the kids. I don't really want to be with the kids. But I've had a couple of ideas. But the problem is I got a message from somebody the other day, and then I went to reply to it, and I just could have sworn it was an email. It wasn't there. So then I looked in Messenger, I looked in WhatsApp, I looked on Twitter messages, but for me and for the website account, and I don't know. So I just sent this person an email, hopefully with a current email, just said, thanks for that lovely message you sent me that I now can't find. And sometimes my phone will ping, and I'll go, that's a message from somebody, but from where? So it's. I mean, I don't want to be the old guy who doesn't understand modern thing, but I think I am that guy. And I do genuinely have a anecdote about Errol Flynn's that I intend to put in the next episode, but of course I'm not going to record that right now, so I might forget. But remind me. No, I'm sure it will come up at some point. I'm sure Errol Flynn's will come up at some point during the Gunfighters commentary. So from me, so that's exciting, isn't it? Hurrah! Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, I'm now going to do a 15-second video about being young. Let's see if I can enter the worlds of TikTok. The only thing TikToking here is my countdown towards my... I'm getting feeling old. The TikTok is the short time I've got left. And with that thought...